Morning, everybody, and welcome to this week's, no, wait, this semi-annual VIN-dow with Robert Hollinshead. Sorry for the tongue-in-cheek there, Bob, but good day to you, sir. Happy summer.
Top of the morning to you, my friends. It's I missed you, Shawnee, and actually, it's been not your fault, my fault. That there's been so many different things going on at one level or another that we've overlooked this, and the only reason we're, I think, going to start this back up is because we've had a number of different people that are saying, believe it or not, a lot of people say you ramble too much, you don't have but there's been a number of people say they really enjoy our nonsense, so I figured we'd give it a whirl. You know what I mean?
Well, what I like doing is when somebody reaches out, I kind of take a peek in the background to see who's actually reaching out, and there's some pretty heavy hitters that really enjoy the content. So let's bring it. Let's talk about the market. Why don't we just dive into that, because it's been a while and she's shifting quickly up here. I don't know what's happening in your neck of the woods, but let's
Shawnee,
dive
obviously,
in.
since we last. Yep, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, go ahead. I was just going to say, I know you talk about how the U.S. market is very homogenized, but let's just dive in and see what's happening.
You got it, pal. So since we talked, obviously, we went through a couple really weird things. Obviously, with this guy talking about tariffs and things, we went into a period where it felt like we were going into COVID. Like it felt exactly like COVID. There was no difference whatsoever. Everybody went into a panic, and some people sold and some people bought, but it was all panic-driven nonsense. You follow me? With hindsight, obviously, right? And we still don't know where it's actually going to settle out. But there was I'm going to say, a 6-week period where it was completely irrational from the wholesale side. Like you couldn't make a mistake if you were Alfred E. Newman. You follow me? It was just unbelievable. And recently, I'd say over the past, and again, not scientific because I haven't thought about this in terms of what time period, but I'd say 3 or 4 weeks, we've seen a lot of grandstanders and fewer participants. What I mean by that, we'll get 700 or 800 people on simulcast in our lanes on an auction day, which is a good number. And when you think about that, look at a stadium with 800 people, and it's not a joke. It's that's not a fragile market, right? But a lot of those people are observers. They're in the grandstands. They're not in the batter's box or in the dugout or on the field, paying attention to get a feel for certain categories of cars. We're going to get the categories in a minute, right? Where some are hot and some are not, but that's normal. But I'll try my best to explain that a little bit better, at least from my perspective. And what we've seen is, coming into this model year change, one of the smartest guys I ever met in my life, I probably have mentioned it before, was a guy from actually Florence, South Carolina. Was a wholesaler, Larry Newsom. That this time of year, he's very funny when you be kicking stones and throwing shit because the market's changing. Right? He say, "Now, Bobby, the hell is wrong with you? All you got to do is count these cars a year older. Boy, what's wrong with you?" Right? So this is back in the late 70s, early 80s, and when you stop and think about it, it rings true till today. We're in a market change because the cars are a year older. That's all you got to do. It's hard to do, put that thinking cap on. But when you do it, the market's perfectly fine. When you don't, and you're looking for unrealistic expectations, look at the market results from 6 weeks ago. You're going to get your toes stubbed, brother. You follow me? And what that all leads to, Shawnee, is basics. It's block and tackle, train for the decathlon and all the rest of it. You got trained. So it's basics. Yeah. In our business, the basics they don't change, right? And they don't alter. They don't alter at all, actually. There's 17 distinct categories of cars, and there's best end users for each one of those categories. That's a fact. Nothing to talk about. And anybody wants to debate it, I'll go to court, and you're going to lose, right? So inside them categories, certain dealers could be best end users for 2 or 3, maybe, like fancy dealers that are on the edge of an area with different brands. They could be best end users on 7 categories, but they're definitely not best end users on 17. And when you listen to chatter amongst guys, and I'm not criticizing people, I'm one of you. You follow me? When you listen to people, fucking CarMax, they pay too much. Carvana pays too much for cars. It's really hilarious because CarMax in particular is the smartest entity, learned over time, created methods and discipline and training that you don't alter from it. They've trained some of the best people in the car business, like an employment agency would, train them and then go get them a job someplace else because they already got the basics under their belt. But when somebody says that they pay too much for cars, that means your brain's not working or you're just not willing to think. No, they don't. They never, ever pay too much for a car. They've never paid too much for a car that I know of, and I've sold them tens of thousands of cars. It actually pisses me off when they're the buyer because they almost always buy a car worth the money. But it's in a very, very tight category. They're not 17 category buyers. They're a 3.5 category buyer. They don't buy everything. They don't bid on everything. And when they bid on cars, they bid to buy, but not to a point where it's an emotional purchase. They only bid after they've touched it, so they know what the Carfax means. It says the Carfax is this, it's minor, it's major. Well, as we all know, that's total bullshit. But they've touched it and looked at the welder, they looked at the thing, and they see what the thing. So they're not afraid of the fact that it has a touch on fax because they touched it and smelled it. You follow that? And therefore, if it's inside their category, frequently we sell them a car with a fractional, touch on fax that is inside their category where you almost made even profit on it. You may have made a little smidge, you see. But the idea, and they do bid on a lot of cars, and they blow people off cars until they get to their number, but that infers to the other people, the other car dealers in the room and online, that somehow or other, even though the vast majority of the time they're buying in the lane as opposed to their name flashing like Carvana does on a computer, so everybody knows exactly what they're bidding on, right? So you don't know until actually the hammer goes down, the auctioneer's nose through the process. But in the meantime, now you can see what they paid. But we, from a data standpoint, in other words, I would call it a psychotic level, understand precisely what they will and what they will pay on any given car. And we also see very clearly when they get blown off a car, which means there is a better end user for that car in that category on that day, you follow me, where it could be 2 or 3 G beyond what they're willing to pay for the car. And therefore, they don't pay too much for cars. They do not pay too much for cars. If they buy 2 or 3% of our cars on a day, they might have bid on 7 or 8% of them. But that means the other 92%, they had no intention of buying, and therefore there definitely is a better end user for those cars. Now, the fact that they are in many lanes, and you do see them standing there and bidding on cars, it tends to, from a fear standpoint of another dealer, to make them feel inferior because they do have the power to buy a lot of cars. When I say a lot of cars, if they're buying 300 cars in an auction at Manheim or something of 6,000 cars, they bought a little percentage of cars, definitely less than what we sold. But in the meantime, the inference is that they're powerful and there's somebody to be afraid of when you're actually on a car, and I find that not to be true. I find them to be excellent, disciplined, incredibly process-driven buyers. Amazing, actually, that they can do it over decades and continue the process, but more importantly, have this tattoo in the brain of dealers that somehow or other they're going wild bidding on cars. They're not. There's very few cars that they do buy that I wouldn't also buy just for fun to take another shot with them. Does that make sense to you, Sean? Now, the only reason I'm giving this background to, let's say, what's happening in the market today, what we're finding is there's way fewer, less really, truly desirable cars that fit, let's call it, a much broader category of potential best end users, ones with the right color, right miles, right gear. In other words, everything good, and then it also has what you would call sex appeal. In other words, something that's standing tall on its tiptoes, You follow me? That's just like kind of floating. You're not even sure the tires are hitting the ground because it's one of them cars, and it don't even matter because that car becomes emotional, not just when you're buying it, and therefore CarMax ain't buying it because it required emotion to buy the car. But when you put that bitch at a 45-degree angle out on the front line, what you wind up with is traffic jams and potential lawsuits for accidents you created by putting that bitch out there and having people going nuts trying to find it, right? What that does is then obviously it evokes the potential of getting too much for a car. So if you're purely a data person, you'd never have that car. You'd never, oh, that's too much money. It doesn't fit our thing. It's true. And you will not have any fun selling those silver, just painted down the side, no sunroof cars. You're never going to have a lot of fun doing that because there's nothing emotional about it. It's just another hog that really isn't a car getting sold. It's somebody selling finance. You know what I mean? So, that rolls all of the end use of cars. It actually then has a very direct relationship to what happens in lanes. Direct. It's a one-to-one relationship, actually, even though it has nothing to do with one another, right? Because how you sell them and the aura that you sell them with and the way that you sell them, where you're not no-selling every other car and pissing people off and forcing them to go someplace else to look for cars and never dropping the hammer 2,000-3,000 under their money, just like in a casino with the bell going off, where it causes people to come back and dump their money in the machine and keep pulling the arm like morons. But eventually you're going to hit because somebody hit the bell. And it's no different, in my estimation, with a seller that drops the hammer with 387 people online watching under the money. What you did is you just created the bell and whistle in a casino. You told everybody online, you stupid asses, you should have been paying attention. Get out of the grandstands, get on the playing field, and put your hand, push the button. You understand, Sean? So creating is first the critical mass side, and that's part of the thing. Availability, the availability of good cars, not good cars, but categories of cars. It's a little difficult to find them because we're not auction buyers. We don't go and act like we found a gem because we bid on it on another stupid ass platform or something. Cars that are like farm bred, first time to the market cars. They're not that. There just is a little bit of a scarcity of that stuff. Call it whatever it is because of financing when they bought it 100 years ago, whatever it is. Who cares what that is? The fact is, the scarcity makes it a little difficult to get 50 Toyotas in a row, to get 50 BMWs in a row, to get 50 Lexus in a row, to get 50 anything in a row, 50 Hondas in a row, right? That enables that magnet to be strong enough to attract enough people that you can create critical mass of inventory, to have critical mass of buyers that creates co-validation of activity. Who's jumping in the freezing cold river first? I don't know how fast the water's going. I don't know if I'm going to hit a rock. Oh, John just jumped in. Shit, I'll jump in too. In other words, the co-validation of activity, that next thing you know, it's bing, bang, boom. What happens next, Shawnee? You guessed it. It's called testosterone. Well, fuck you, no, fuck you, no, fuck you. See, and that becomes emotional. By the way, on the second fuck you, CarMax is out. You follow me? Because they're not doing nothing emotional. They're not doing it. You can't get them to be emotional about a car because that's against their process. In the meantime, the other 697 dealers that are online, they potentially could because they see and they know that dealership, and they notice, well, he could do it, I can do it, you can do it, I can do it. In other words, it's kind of like, I use this analogy, it sounds hard, but it's true. I'm going grocery shopping. Okay. Well, I know I'm not. The cardiologist said I'm fat and I'm going to die soon because my battery's running out, so I better not buy things that make me fatter, right? So I'm going to avoid the potato chip lane. I ain't bringing no potato chips home. But you went hungry. You went to the store hungry. What's the shot you ain't bringing potato chips home with you? Zero. You see that? So in other words, the emotional thing, right? Like the thing that's hard to get away from, human nature and so forth, right? It's hard to get away from. When you put the potato chips out there and you make them very attractive to somebody that's semi-hungry, because he's a category, maybe a category and a half away from being a real buyer for that car because it fits their demographic and their inventory and their geography and all the rest of it. In other words, once you start getting certain activity you want to do. Next thing you know, you got potato chip buyers, emotional. You follow me? And that's where, you know, when you say you paid too much for a car, and I could only tell you of the last million cars that I've bought and sold personally with my own money, right? That you can't pay too much for something with tits. Something like there's something that's real and it's like standing tall and it's hoovering and so forth. And so it's Jesus Christ, you see what he paid for that car? Another wholesaler's in the store. You understand? Yeah, and you got 30 more. I'll take them too, by the way. Because let's just say, for instance, it is something that's hoovering. It is too much money. And then you put it in front of 600 people, and all of a sudden that car clips 3 Gs. It wasn't too much money, was it? Brought too much money as well. And when that occurs, I can't tell you endless times when a dealer comes back, you know, Bob, I paid too much money for your cars. Really? No shit. Don't buy them. Oh, no, we always sell them. Usually they're the first ones sold coming off the truck. So you did pay too much because you did sell them instantly. Yeah, plus the salespeople always like those cars better because there's usually something really good, right? So in other words, the I would call it the parameters of what causes us to make assumptions about things aren't necessarily true. And a market that we're in right now, this kind of market's a little weird. It's good, but it's not weird. It's good. But that Ferrari brought 27,000 more than it should have brought. Yeah, I know. But then the Mercedes E-Class didn't bring half of what you paid for it. You paid 57,000. Don't bring 26. Well, that don't mean it's worth 26. It just means that that category of car at this minute, right, is absolutely worthless. They got too many. They don't want them. They got new ones. They got things falling all over the place. There isn't a used car dealer in the world that's looking for that silver car with no gear, or even if it has gear. You got to sell to somebody for 60 Gs. It gets weird. It gets into a category that is extraordinarily tough. Here, when Larry Newsom, the year change. It's a year change. You see, so you can kick stones, and we're doing it now. In other words, having a shitty average per car thing because of things. And everybody's mad at everybody else. Now we're mad at our recon people, and we're mad about the transporter didn't get it there 2 seconds before it was supposed to be there and things. Because now all of the things that could potentially be a pain in your ass that aren't any issue whatsoever when the market's ripping, like the almost COVID market 3 months ago or whatever the hell it was, right? It starts to become a little bit of a thing. And since this is the only 52nd year that I've experienced this, still comes as a shock. It's still shocking. I can't believe the market's like this right now. You know, second day after 4th of July and so forth. Yeah, it's shocking. The roads are completely dead. You can lay down in the middle of the highway right now and not hit nobody there. He said, sure. So, in other words, it's like, yeah, you got to take a second and think a little bit. Doesn't help nothing. It doesn't make you feel like you're a winner. Because you got cars that don't make any sense for whatever reason. That to me is kind of the way I feel that the circumstances that we got at this moment. You show up with 20 good 911s in a row that sold for, let's say, 127,000 7 years ago, and it brings 142,000. That's emotional. That's midlife crisis gangs of old fat people that got to have one, and they don't really care. I can afford to show off I got this car. That's what you got going on there. That ain't got nothing to do with a market. You see what I'm saying to you? That's got something to do with cars and coffees, and they're going to have one. You follow me? But that ain't got nothing to do with a market. That car ain't getting sold to a new car dealer that's going to go certified, because that's where it came from. It ain't unusual to buy one for $222. They were asking $211, and it brings $242. You see what I'm saying to you, Shoney? In other words, it's not like that's not unusual. Is it irrational? Oh, it's completely irrational. But that ain't happening on a Chevy Volt, and it ain't happening on a GLA with no moonroof. It ain't happening, Mo. Or some pickup truck with no gear that came from the Easter BIP. No, that's not happening. It's not what we got. That's probably way too much nonsense and rambling bullshit, Shawnee, but I think that's what we got for today. I got notes of other things forever that we could talk about, but I think people will be snoring. I'll put people to sleep, and they'll be crashing their self-driving Teslas, and I don't want that to happen. You know what I mean?
Well, all they got to do is subscribe, and they'll get the next one to download automatically to their phone. But I can't believe I forgot about everything's a year older, and I've been
It's
doing
a year
this
older, Sean.
half.
So you're thinking last year. The market's thinking this year.
Yeah. Thank you, Bob. Thank you, everyone. We'll talk next
Dig,
week.
dig, 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 dig.